Chris Gillen, welcome back to the second part of our fascinating
Thank you.
discussion that we started to delve much more into the world of AI. So last time around, we talked a lot about brand loyalty, the customer experience, I suppose, and some of the issues that you've seen in organizations from Target right through to Toys R Us, and we talked a little bit about the survey that you guys have also launched, some of the insights there. One of the things that I picked up when I was reading a little bit of background, some of the stuff that you've been talking about, is the phases of adoption of AI. AI has been obviously, I was going to say mainstream, but everybody now, from the proverbial granny and right down to the 5-year-old knows what AI is, or at least professes to know what AI. And then you've got experts like ourselves who profess to know everything about it and really know an awful lot about it. But you mentioned something about the phases of adoption, and correct me again if I'm wrong. You talked about chaos and misunderstanding phase, right through to the adaptation and disruption, and then into the normalization and advancement. So those are lots of big words for me to say on an afternoon. But do you want to talk me through that a little bit more, so we can put a little bit of meat on the bones of that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I remind people we've been here before, and they say, "What do you mean we've been here before?" And I said, every technological advancement that's happened in human history has led to massive change. And when AI first dropped, when OpenAI dropped chatbot and kind of broke the mold, if you will, I wanted to say, okay, so this is going to create unbelievable, unparalleled change on so many levels. So I drew inspiration from the Industrial Revolution. Right. And there's a lot of innovations that happened during the Industrial Revolution, many of them game changing. But the biggest one, in my opinion, was the steam engine. And what the steam engine did in the Industrial Revolution is similar to what's happening with AI. And so I did a little research just to say, well, what did that look like back in the 1800s, right? When the steam engine came and it was revolutionizing factory work and many other things, what happened. And that's where that model kind of came from. The first thing that happened was chaos and misunderstanding, because it was new. Nobody really knew what it was. People were making assumptions. There were camps that said the steam engine was going to ruin the world, and people were going to be out of jobs, and this was the end of life as we know it. There were groups of people that were going around to factories and sabotaging steam engines because they just thought it was the antithesis of, it was the devil and it was going to do terrible things. And so there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of confusion. And I see parallels in what we're doing today. I mean, you can't read the news or go on LinkedIn and not see article after article, and those are competing positions. Some people are saying this is terrible, it's dangerous, it's going to take over and destroy the world. Other people are on the camp like me. We're like, no, this is wonderful technology. It's really propelling us into the fourth revolution, where we will, where today we're working cerebrally and with our hands, where we're really going to become a much more creative society. And so that's where that piece of it came from. What can you expect? And I think for the last year, we have definitely been in the chaos and confusion phase. But what you're starting to see is adoption now. You're starting to see some companies step up and start implementing AI, and we're going to learn from that, right? And so those are going to become the models, the IKEAs, the Targets, the other companies that are kind of on the forefront, that are now starting to put AI in place. It'll become more normal, which will take us to the next phase of normalization, where people will start to have a framework of, oh, this is how I can implement AI. This is another company that's done it. I like what they've done it, and replication will begin to happen. So that's really where that kind of came from, and I've been following that, and so far it's playing out pretty closely to kind of the phases we're in. And I'm excited because the chaos and the misunderstanding phase, right? So, there's a lot of confusion there, but what's really, really where rubber meets road is these companies really starting to implement and adopt and, figure out what's working and what isn't working. And I would say in the next couple of years, that will lead to more normalization. The caveat to that, as you know, Oliver, is it's evolving at a pace we've never seen. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
literally every day there's something new that launches. That's another evolution, another enhancement. The
Mm-hmm.
danger that brands are going to experience with that is if they are not keeping up, they're going to implement something that's going to be outdated in about 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that other balance of them having to kind of keep up. That's my biggest fear for companies right now is most companies in the US are so focused right now because revenues are declining, they're losing customers, there's inflationary pressures here, that they're so focused on just the survival of their
Yeah.
business, they don't have time. They're not even looking at what AI could do. And that's a scary place to be because as this stuff advances, those are the same companies that if they don't get on board, if they don't kind of figure it out, could be obsolete in the next year or two.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we're thinking about your analogy as the steam engine, and I was even thinking back to, more recent time. There was when speech recognition hit the contact center industry, and that was going to revolutionize things. And
Yeah.
it hasn't. But you're absolutely right, though. The one differentiating factor here is speed of change. It's stuff that we, you know, and a lot of us who have been in this industry and we're looking at GPT and transformer model that had been happening for realistically, it's been there now for 5 or 6 years, but all of a sudden the scale has changed, the amount of investment, the amount of money going into this has changed radically.
Yeah.
And even, I listened to something, was it Scarlett Johansson's voice or whoever that
That's
OpenAI?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, reputedly
Yeah.
used. I'm not sure. They have denied that it is her, but anyway,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
but the capability of that, and obviously you hear live demos, and they're always actually done to the very best, of course, but it was scarily realistic in terms of how good it was, and I know they've launched the ability to leverage audio, video, visuals as well as text, and it is becoming really scary in terms of how quickly it is advancing.
Yeah.
And as you say, lots of organizations, and they're betwixt in between, that they want to now adapt and make use of this technology, but
Yeah.
the core problem of running the business is still there, or the
Yes.
core challenge, not problem. Um, Explain a little bit to me and to, I suppose, the audience more the difference between what I would have called the good old fashioned AI that's been around maybe since the late 1950s or 1958, I think, in the Dartmouth
Yeah.
conference. To what we know nowadays are since OpenAI launched GPT
Yeah.
and obviously the Gemini, and
Yeah.
there's a few other
Yeah.
models there. What's the core difference here, and why it's
Yeah.
so rapidly changing?
Sure. It can be very confusing because a lot of these terms get thrown around, and some are in the wrong context. And there's a lot of different ways to look at the ever evolving. I try to break it down into three. I try to keep it really simple for people and break it down into three categories. We have all been using AI for quite some time. It's what I refer to as narrow AI or weak AI. Think Siri, think Alexa. You're interacting, you're speaking with a virtual assistant, a voice. It can recognize some commands. It can do some basic tasks. I use Alexa in my house and I have built routines. So I can say, Alexa, turn on all the lights, and Alexa will turn on all the lights in my house. So we've been using this kind of form of AI, weak AI. Where we are now is what I refer to as general AI, and there's a multitude of terms you can do that, but it's stronger AI, in my opinion, right? So this is technology that has the ability it possesses the ability to learn, to understand, to apply knowledge, where a weak AI, normal AI, is just following a set of instructions. Do this, do this, do this. But you can't interact with Alexa or Siri on any meaningful way, right? So you think of general AI or stronger AI being chatbot. So now I can have a whole conversation, unscripted, unrefined conversation, and it will learn from that conversation. It's
Mm-hmm.
taking that data and it's actually doing things. And I think the critical thing there is it's got the ability to complete a wide range of tasks. This is kind of the next evolution of where we're headed. So chatbot GPT, I am an OpenAI fan. I think what they're doing is pretty incredible. And I think that they were the first to get it out there. If you have the paid for version of OpenAI, hopefully your listeners are using the voice interactive feature, because they're going to be launching, if you can go to their website and look, they're going to be launching the next evolution of that, which will be more emotive. It can sing, it can laugh, it will be able to do different accents. That's mind blowing to me. But that evolution of that will eventually you being able to say, go do something for me, right? So you might be able to say, hey, chatbot or whatever. I think there's a growing consensus that we need to change the name of chatbot. It doesn't work for anybody. But imagine you being able to say, hey, book a car for me. And then behind the scenes, it's connecting with other APIs of other businesses, only to come back to tell you, hey, Oliver, your car's been booked. It'll be here in 15 minutes. We are rapidly progressing towards that. And you've seen some slight examples. It's a company out of China that had a device called Rabbit that was kind of going to be the new cell phone. That was really impressive when the CEO have not seen that yet. So, we do have to be careful about AI washing, people using this kind of terminology just to drive promotion. But general AI is kind of that next evolution, and you're going to see more and more happening with that task completion. There's a growing theory about eventually you having a virtual you, and your virtual you could be doing all of your tasks behind the scenes while you're focused on other things, right? So that's pretty cool. And where all of this is leading, and I think where people get really, really concerned is when we talk about super AI or super intelligence, right? This is where AI goes beyond basic, learning, being trained on data, and really can start to think and do things on its own. And if depending on and look, there's a lot of people in here a heck of a lot smarter than me, but if you listen to Sam Altman or other people really talk about super artificial intelligence, I think the running theory is in the next 5 years, maybe that might be real possible. And who knows what that's going to look like. Like, I can't even wrap my head around what a super intelligent bot would be able to do. But it's progressing so quickly that it's just literally hard to keep up with. And I think that's a real challenge in this whole thing now, is that we've just seen the acceleration of this technology grow beyond our capability to really understand it and implement it. And I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon. So my message for companies is you at least need to have a roadmap. When I speak, I ask the first question in my conferences is I ask, how many of you have at least an AI roadmap? And maybe 40% of the room will put their hand up. And I tell the other 60%, you're already way behind. You better at least, I don't say you have to implement it, but you better at least be in a phase where you're thinking about it. How would you implement? What would it look like? Where are you going to implement it, and developing a roadmap for it? Or else you will be left behind.
And just picking up on where you think those advancements are going. In the previous episode, we touched on AI combined with human emotion.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about, does AI have emotion? Will it have emotion? Will it understand emotion? I mean, do you think that direction of travel is a likely scenario? And that concept of the human emotion then ultimately becoming part of the AI emotion. What does that mean?
Yeah. I think we're almost there. I think I'm really curious to see this next release of OpenAI's chatbot voice assistant, because they're saying that it will be the ability to be more expressive, if you will. And I do think we'll get there. I mean, there are already bots that can detect sentiment. They know when you're upset. They know when you're not. And I think there will be an element of being able to connect with somebody a lot better. The missing element is always going to be the context of empathy. A bot will never have experienced a loss of a pet, right? A bot will never have experienced. Now, it can articulate and say, gosh, I'm sorry you feel bad about that. But that's never going to replace somebody on the other end of that phone saying, I lost a pet too, and I know exactly how it feels. That's that emotional connection and intelligence that maybe in a realm of super AI might be able to get there on some level. That's where I go back, that we can't forget our nature and who we are. We crave connection. We want to be around. We want to talk. We work with a lot of restaurant clients, Oliver, and I remind them that 50% of the experience is the food. That's a very important thing, right? You got to have good food. But the other 50% of the experience is the connection that I make with that server or that bartender. And what is that relationship? Are we connected? Do I want to come back and see you again? The food's great, but I love seeing Oliver. So I'm going to go back every other week and see him. That's a powerful connection that a lot of brands just miss. They just overlook how important that is. And that's where that AI plus HEI kind of come together to create what I think is more of the perfect CX storm for companies in a positive way.
Yeah, and I have a couple of pet hates in that food industry or service industry. One is where the service charge is automatically added to the bill, and I'm going, well, if I want to pay a service charge, I will base on the service. And quite often you get maybe a poor quality service, and
Yeah,
you're going, well. And I have been in restaurants where, but that's my nature. I have argued with these, saying I'm not paying that service charge. Service is absolutely appalling.
yeah, that's right.
But I think that's organized, or in this particular instance, certain restaurants or whatever, just being lazy in terms of back to what we discussed in previous podcasts around brand loyalty and understanding what the customer feels and just having that lazy approach to it. But I do think you're right in terms of the and then the analogy, the table stakes and the quality of the product, the food is always up there, but the service is certainly for repeat customers. And I've used my analogy in previous podcasts of my cup of coffee or my flat white. Even though there's an expensive coffee making machine in the office, I would still go out to the little coffee shop up the street because there's a little bit of human interaction. And I'm not just going to pay $5 or the equivalent for my coffee. I'm going because I want to get out of the office. I want to chat to somebody else about something that isn't technology.
Yeah. Starbucks is a great example of this, right? They came out last quarter with a rare quarterly revenue miss, which just doesn't happen. And then there was a big fervor, a blow up about Starbucks losing momentum and people not, wanting to go as much and be connected. And there was a lot of conversation about this in some forums. And I reminded people about this, that when Starbucks started, they had this vision to be your third home, right? Meaning you drink coffee at home, you drink coffee at the office. They wanted to create a third place for you to come and drink coffee. And what really put Starbucks on the map, and people can't remember this, right, was this fact that you could walk in, they would ask you your name, they would write it on the cup, which nobody was doing at that time. And then when you came back the next day, they remembered you. And they said, "Hey, Oliver, welcome back. Would you like you look like a caramel latte guy." Adam, I'll throw it out. Right? And people, their minds were blown. They're like, wow, a place where I can come in, they remember me, they get to know me, their product is good, and it's just an incredible experience. Walk into a Starbucks today and see if that happens, right? It is hit and miss. I'm not going to say that it's not, that it doesn't, but they've lost their way. And I think a lot of brands right now are needing to be reminded of what made them great in the first place and how they get back to that. Because I think blanket statement, they've all devalued the humanness of their business in some way in favor of this belief that the customer wants a humanless experience. I want to order from my app. I want to pick my coffee up. I don't want to talk to anybody. Certainly people do. Don't get me wrong. But they invested so much money, as we see other brands doing, in these digital channels that are anti-CX, anti-experience, that now they're all kind of going, well, we're losing customers and our dine-in business traffic is down, or our store, our foot traffic in our store is down. And they need to step back and rethink this. Like, how important is that human experience in the CX experience? It's really important. And I hope AI allows brands to do some things that bring the humanness of their business back to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of an oxymoron, almost using AI to bring the humanness back.
That's right.
I guess back to your point in the previous podcast where you talked about combining the AI and the human emotion side of things. And I think again in this industry we've talked for a long time about personalization and how to personalize engagement. I think we've always defaulted to technology, and I think the Starbucks, while I do question some of their coffee quality at times, but I do think that approach, when they did introduce it, was personalization at a very simple but a very effective way. And it didn't need a whole, yes, of course, baristas, etc., had to be trained, but it didn't need a whole suite of technology to do it. It just needed a bit of innovation, of thinking maybe
That's right.
outside of the box.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. One good, I tell my restaurant clients, one outstanding server or bartender can generate more revenue for you than any loyalty program. Because if they're doing their job correctly and they're building this connection, like I mentioned before, it should be 50% of the reason I want to go back and visit the brand. Talk to any local that has their local watering hole, the bar they go to, the pub they go to. They go there because they have a connection, right? They know people there that they like and they want to be around and they want to talk to and they enjoy that experience. Most brands have really forgotten about the importance of that. You're lucky nowadays if you get acknowledged anywhere you go, right? I mean, it just we've lowered the bar so much on our expectations around service. I think part of that was driven by COVID. That the danger is now it's just become mundane. You don't even expect it. And so in the rare times that you do get it, it blows your mind. Like, wow, right? But I say this, consumers have a responsibility here too. We have to stop saying mediocre service is okay. If consumers started to say, it was a crappy experience, I'm not going back, brands would change their tune. The problem is we've lowered our expectations so much, we don't even think about it.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's maybe it's part of the human psyche or the failure within consumers. Back to the scenario about poor services in a restaurant environment. Quite often, and I don't know what the stats are, but I would say it's quite high. The number of people, when they're asked by the server, what was the quality of your food like, or did you enjoy your meal, will often be polite and say, yes, it was lovely, even though perhaps maybe 50% ago and actually it wasn't cooked quite the way I like. Not that there was anything wrong with the food per se, maybe it wasn't cooked the way they liked, maybe it was whatever. But I think there's nothing wrong. And in fact, and again, maybe it's how the organization's asked that trying to elicit that information would be hugely beneficial. And not that you're always going to act on it, but at least understanding. But I think you're right. We as consumers have that obligation as well to give that information back, to do it in the right manner. And it's, in a face-to-face environment, it can be easier, but also in some regards in an online or digital environment, it also can be easier because you don't have that. What is the word that the fear factor of actually trying? You're feeling you're upsetting someone who's only doing their job because that's sometimes my family would say, they're only doing their job at the end of the day, and I go, well, it's not about the individual or not about their job. If you want feedback, let's give them feedback.
Yeah. And how you administer that and what context you put that in will determine the type of feedback. If your feedback program only caters to the disgruntled, unhappy customer because they reach out when they've had a problem, then that's the only feedback you're going to get. And then you're just going to start to assume that all feedback is like this. Like you ask any frontline worker today what they think about customer feedback, and they recoil in horror because all they get is negative feedback. They're only told when they do something wrong. That's why companies like Chick-fil-A, I think, are great examples of a company who uses positive customer feedback to make their people better. And I've seen this in Chick-fil-A. If somebody goes online and says Oliver was great, at the visit, they're taking that and they're using that. They're saying, Oliver, look at this feedback you got. They're motivating, inspiring as a result of it. So brands have to recalibrate, I think. Where does customer feedback fit into our journey? And if the answer to that is post-experience, post-transaction, you're doing it wrong. You need to move that up in the journey. You need to allow the customer, whether they purchase or not, depending on your business, to engage you, to give you feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. If you do that in the right way, you'll find that the majority of your feedback you get will be constructive, positive, tangible feedback you can actually do something with, and not just one person's opinion.
Yeah. And I suppose maybe that's casting your mind forward or looking into that crystal ball that we all possess, because they're all knowledgeable, or we believe we are. What do you see coming down the track, Chris? And having said that the speed of innovation is a frightening thing, you run a huge risk here of being wrong within 6 weeks, never mind 6 years. What do you see coming down the track in both the technology, but also how the technology may be used in the CX industry that you're most excited about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're still in this kind of chaos and misunderstanding phase, coupled with all of these other micro and macro things that are happening. Birth rate decline, aging population, changing consumer sentiment, you name it. I think there's going to be more disruption. I think you're already seeing a number of long-standing brands, Red Lobster, places like that, that are been around since I was a kid, going out of business because they have not been able to keep up with changing consumer sentiment. And there's going to be more of that. Brands are in trouble, and it's something that people don't like to talk about, but restaurants, retail, I mean, almost all companies right now are kind of in this phase of we're losing revenue, we're losing customer count. What do we do? We need to reinvent, we need to rethink. The word on the street right now is everybody using this word retrenching, which is meaning, hey, I'm going back now. If I'm a brand, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to go back into hopefully what made me great in the first place. In that, though, there will naturally be more AI implementation and things I think brands were going to start thinking about to kind of bolster their position, drive more traffic and more revenue. That will continue to happen because we talked about IKEA, Target, brands like that are starting to put it out there. So more people are going to start having a frame of reference, which is what I think the issue is today. People just don't know. They can't visualize what it will look like. So when they see brands doing it, there'll be copycats. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like, ooh, I want to do that, right? I think that's going to happen. I think with that, again, I tie it back to the Industrial Revolution, there is going to be job loss. People, I mean, we are going to disrupt industries. We're starting to see that now because AI will be able to do things. I like to put that in the context, though, Oliver, of what you're doing today. If it's a mundane, like I used to say this about my call center agents, I never found one that was happy just sitting there pushing a button, right? Your whole job was answering yes or no. They want meaningful work. And I hope that's where AI is taking us. I hope it's going to get all of the mundane, just tedious kind of stuff off the plate for people and elevate them. So there will be an element of reskilling that will come. There are some people that will need to be reskilled and retrained, no different than what happened in the Industrial Revolution. And the last piece of this, and probably the most exciting piece, is all that leads to jobs and things being created that we don't even have any idea of what those look like today, right? And that's kind of the exciting part of this whole thing. We're going to have to go through this. There's going to be turbulence, there's going to be issues, people are going to lose jobs, be reskilled in others, but I think you come out on the other side of this looking completely different than we went into it. We're going to be more cerebral workers, as I like to say, less with our hands, less tasking, more with this, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about this a while ago myself. There's obviously a raft of legislation that's coming out, or both in the US and Europe, throughout the world, around how to. I think their focus is more about how to control AI, which I can understand. I'd rather see, well, not rather, but I'd like to see as much focus around some of the things you've mentioned there about what are government organizations doing to try and prepare the workforce, prepare education system, so that we can, as as humanity, almost try to take advantage of what the technology, as opposed to, I think, but it might be a human thing. There's this natural reticence that let's control, as opposed to in conjunction. Yeah, of course, we need to control all the bad actors, capitalization, or capitalism itself doesn't necessarily lead to equality of outcomes, etc. But can we put as much attention towards how can we actually exploit, expand, bring education into it, bring the workforce into it to help get us prepared? Because, like it or not, it's coming down the train track, a lot of change.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you're seeing any of that happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've started the regulatory conversation is a hot topic, as you know, right? Everybody's talking about that, and I don't know, I'm on the fence. By one token, I understand that this is a very, very powerful technology, and has the potential to do so many great things, but at the same time has the potential to be really, really scary on many levels. And there's a dark side of AI that less people are talking about, and that's how the fraudsters and the bad actors are beginning to use AI too, and they're rapidly advancing their ability to perpetrate fraud and scams. So I get it. I worry though, because I've never really seen a government intervention that promoted creativity. It stifled creativity.
Mm,
So I like to see that, yes, government should have some framework. Companies should be on the hook for how they're thinking about implementing AI and in what way. So I do think that the company plays a big part in, being open and transparent about the data and where they're getting the data and how they're using the data. Those are things that I think government should standardize, almost like what we did with CCPA or GDRP, right? For
GDPR,
data,
yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. And I think something like that makes sense, but I personally would not like to see government getting so involved that it stifled the innovation and creativity of where AI can take us. But I do think that again is becoming more and more um, will become more transparent for companies. OpenAI has recently, in the last probably, I don't know, 2, 3 months, have been doing what I consider to be a pretty good job of actually posting their kind of the behind the scenes. This is how we train the data models. This is where we're getting the
Mm,
data. This is what we're doing with the data. And there has to be that level of transparency from companies because people are going to demand it eventually. Once they understand it better, I think they will. So there is the consideration I think companies have to give right now in terms of the ethics and the transparency and the standards by which they're going to roll out AI, because right now that falls squarely on them.
yeah, and there is a danger, I suppose, yes, that we certainly and government, the stifling of innovation, and again back to the speed of change, because it is changing so rapidly. Unless we can promote that innovation and allow mistakes to happen in a controlled manner, then what's going to end up is going to be in the preserve of a few large corporations
Yeah.
that actually dictate where it's going, because the rest of us, in terms of the smaller organizations who want to innovate, will be either hamstrung by the sheer cost of that or the regulations
Mm-hmm.
around that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
unless we get that level of, and it's hard to get that balance, we need to get that balance right
Yeah.
somewhere, and hopefully we will move in that direction.
Yeah. I hope
Uh,
so. I mean, there's so much that will happen in the next 3, 5 years, and some of it maybe we can anticipate, some of it we can't. What I encourage everybody to do, regardless whether you're a company, whether you're an individual, educate yourself.
mm,
People ask me all the time, like, what can I do? I said, just educate yourself. Just understand what AI is and what it isn't, and at a base level, understand when you talk to AI, what happens to your data.
mm,
And I think those are really important things for consumers and employees of businesses and businesses to really embrace. That's that we should be learning. We should all be learning about AI and what it is and what it isn't, because we'll be much more informed as we
mm,
continue to move down the road. There was a great quote that I heard that said, an informed minority will always be able to manipulate an uninformed majority, right? So the worst thing that can happen is certain individuals having all the knowledge about AI where everybody else remains ignorant, right? So I'm a huge fan of the more people can understand it, play with it, get their heads, the more informed we're going to be. So we don't go down perilous roads because of our lack of knowledge and information.
mm. I think that's a very pertinent quote, particularly in the current year of elections that we're running. Where I am, there's one due in 7 days, which is on the 4th of July, which
Yeah.
coincides with Independence Day. But there's another looming election come November time as well. We'll not stray into that. I do from time to time with friends and colleagues in the US, but I think we're not going to stray into that. But I think, yeah, the informed minority is definitely a very good analogy, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the key takeaway, and I think it's been prevalent throughout the conversation, Chris, which is fantastic, which is the education, um, because we are all learning, and I would agree with you, no matter what vendor or what individual or what organization uh, lets you believe that they understand everything that's happening in this world, then I would stay well away from them, because
That's right.
even the most educated of individuals are struggling to understand what's happening. So I
Yeah,
think the
yeah,
education piece is critical for an
yeah,
individual and the
yeah,
organization.
yeah. And Oliver, there are some really brilliant, well-informed AI consultants that are out there that brands would be wise to engage on some level. You know, have them come and talk, or
Yeah.
you know, however, I think that's a really, really important thing for, like you said, for people and businesses to be doing right now.
Chris, it's been fantastic talking to you. I'm conscious we're up against time here. It's been a brilliant chat over the last couple of episodes. You've enlightened us, you've enlightened our listeners. And I know you have that survey that mentioned, I think we'll post the link to that in terms of whenever we promote the podcast as well. So I think that'll be
Right.
invaluable to some of our listeners. Chris Gillen,
Awesome.
thank you very much for your time.
Thanks,
Enjoy
Oliver.
speaking to you. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Take care.